Dear Evan Hansen is a musical with book by Stephen Levinson, with music and lyrics by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul. Copyright is reserved by these names. The Dear Evan Hansen script is published by Theater Communications Group. Attention! The following episode has references of suicide and sexual content. If you may be sensitive to these topics, please be advised and change the podcast now. Thank you, and enjoy. Hello and welcome to One Sock Radio. I am your host, Cody Novotny.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is time for a little chat. Sit back and relax. How about that? Make some breakfast and a cup of joe. Take some sips. And on we'll go. Enjoy!
Today is the beginning of a project I would like to try out here on this podcast. But first, let me back up. For the very few people up to this point who have discovered this podcast, you will have noticed I haven't been uploading episodes regularly for a long time. For the past few months, all of my free time has been soaked up by university, something I've been talking about for a fair bit before my absence. And while I was at university, I discovered that theater in general is my passion. Every department of production catches my eye. Scenic design, construction, costuming, lighting, props. Seriously, the list goes on and on. I could spend the next hour just listing off these different areas. And one thing caught my attention most of all. My favorite class of the semester, surprisingly topping the acting class, was script analysis. I know. That boring class where you always have reading assignments and you have to make sense out of a playing card and some bubble gum. I know. But my professor, Stephen Huff, I don't know. He taught it in such a way that grabbed my interest. Literally, I would spend days investigating a single script until I felt like I fully understood it and loved every second of it. I devised my own method as well as incorporating other known methods, and here I sit with this knowledge of, if I don't get to be an actor, this is my second choice by far. But unlike acting, I don't have a consistent way to practice it that feels meaningful. I also don't know how to apply myself to theater companies as a dramaturge, which is basically someone who researches a show and the world it finds itself in. So, I have come up with this project. Here on this podcast, I'm going to start uploading episodes of deconstructing plays down to their bare bones to see exactly what the playwright wants us to get out of it, what the story is really telling, the sense behind the playing card and the bubblegum. I don't really have a name for this project, but that will probably come when I see it start to take shape. And there's also something else I want this project to do. I want it to teach people some ideas. I always hear people talk about a show being bad or a show being good. You know,
The perfect production.
or
the most rotten show ever created.
I can't tell you how many times I've encountered people who have said that a show that I thought was really good was really bad. How someone has bad taste or good taste. Everyone has varying opinions of art. And that's what makes it difficult to say if it's good or bad. But don't get me wrong. You can still say whether or not you liked it. But there is also another element to it. Sometimes the creative mind of a piece makes decisions that people don't notice or understand, which leads them, the audience, to believe that they were bad decisions. Simply because you don't understand it doesn't mean the decision was bad. Which leads me to the second thing I want this show to talk about.
Ask the wise, don't criticize.
God. There are so many bold and creative choices that are made in the design process of a show that get horrifically overlooked. I know you've heard this be said about a movie. Wow, that was so stupid. Why did they do that? It makes no sense. Or something along those lines. That people are so quick to judge a creative choice without even trying to figure out why it was made in the first place. This kind of thought process actually robs people of seeing the bigger picture, of what the choice was conveying. Why the main character chose to walk into the garage with the chainsaws. Why Mignons actively showed the sexualization of underage girls. Why they had Hannah Baker slit her wrist instead of overdosing on pills like she did in the book. All these decisions have a reason behind it. And the most often case when they are overlooked is that people look at what they see on the surface, and if it makes them uncomfortable or angry, they just want to focus on that feeling and stop there. They don't want to dig deeper. They want to feel uncomfortable or angry. They want to believe that the writer or director had some negative, ulterior motive behind it, or they wrote it in for no reason at all. Or, at least, that is what my observation has found. In fact, I've seen this kind of judgment in several reviews of this show I will be talking about today. And, of course, it occurs with people who think that certain shows are great as well. But more often than not, these are the people who find those reasonings behind the choices. For some examples, of the people on the positive spectrum are those who love a musical because of its show tunes, or like a movie only because of its eye candy value. So, the two things I hope you take away from this series is that art cannot be qualified as good or bad. and you can crucify me if I ever, from here on out, seriously judge a piece like this. And to ask the wise, don't criticize. Yeah, I know. The line sounds cheesy, but you gotta love it. Come on. Now that the pre-ramble is out of the way, let's get started on the first episode about our first show on this podcast. If you are a theater nerd of any kind, you will have certainly heard about this musical, but something that you probably didn't know is that in September, this show will also be hitting the big screens. Winner of 6 Tony Awards and music by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul with book by Stephen Levinson, let me introduce one of my favorite musicals of the 21st century, Dear Evan Hansen. To give a description on the show, Dear Evan Hansen follows the story about a young man who has crippling social anxiety, feeling isolated from the world around him, but he is pulled in quickly when a self-written letter to himself is found in the pocket of a recently deceased classmate, Connor Murphy, a victim of suicide, leaving Connor's family to think that he and Evan were friends, sending Evan down a rabbit hole of lies frosted with good intentions. Or is it? That is one of my favorite parts about this show, is how morally questionable everything is. Something that really pushed me to make this musical the first addition to this podcast was the misconstrued idea that the show commends Evan, or that Evan doesn't face any repercussions for his actions. How this show is about mental illness, or how the show is intended to have a moral lesson. Okay, not to go on a ramble, but this will be something I'll be bringing up with each show. I believe strongly that every story-driven piece of art can fit under one of these 4 categories: teaching, social commentary, cautionary tale, or entertainment. So, teaching is the typical story that is meant to teach something, like a life or moral lesson. Social commentary is a show that simply reflects a common or uncommon societal trait. Cautionary tale is, well, it's similar to teaching, but is used as a warning. Like the stick figures on a warning label that always get brutalized in some way. And entertainment, which has none of these intentions, but is created simply to invoke an emotion or a sensation, like horror, or, oh god, dare I say, porn. Now, we'll get into what I would classify Dear Evan Hansen as in a later episode. So, in this series of episodes, I will be looking at each of the 8 characters, and all symbolism used, as well as clarifying some concerns, and answering the most asked questions about the show, like why Connor Murphy really killed himself. This is something I'm going to preface in each episode. This series is going to be of my interpretation of the script. It is entirely possible that you will have different thoughts or conclusions than I will. My interpretation is not the end-all be-all, nor am I advertising it to be. And all of my conclusions will be backed by evidence found in the script. So, with all that now being out in the universe, I hope you enjoy the analysis of Dear Evan Hansen. I will see you in the next episode, where we will begin talking about Treasury Secretary Jared Kleinman and what Dear Evan Hansen is really about. Before I leave, you are valid whether you like the show or not. Just remember, ask the wise, don't criticize. Have a good one.
Your company was just swell. I hope you enjoyed our little prank. Please have a good morning and a wonderful rest of your day.
One Sock Radio is self-produced, with readings, script, and music by me, Cody Novotny.